gang. Hello, welcome everybody. Haven't seen me for a little while. I've been off doing my Boer War visits to the monuments, but I'm back with a little exclusive for you today. Now, you knew that in Brakpan we were moving out of the Toymar Flats, and I mentioned Dad getting a house with a garden, and I was allowed to have a dog, and it ended up being in Gladstone Avenue, which was down towards the Brakpan Dam. Probably a 3-bedroom house, maybe 4. We had a bit more room to move. Dad bought a stereo and record player. Just before we get into that, the reason I want to take a couple of episodes for Gladstone Avenue is because that was probably the longest place we lived when we were in Brakpan. Let's go back a step. One of the really fun things that I forgot to mention last time was we met a projectionist from the Springbok Drive-In. When we were in the Park Hotel, a little guy called Dave with an extended head, like a Martian. Little glasses but a large head. Dave was the projectionist. And as a treat, he used to let us come along with him. He'd get down to the drive-in at about 5, the Springbok Drive-In. All overgrown now with weeds and not much memory of it ever being a drive-in. But we'd follow him down, or maybe he'd go in our car sometimes, and we'd park next to the projectionist booth. And it was wonderful. I could run around, there were no cars there, all the gates were still locked. Had the whole place to myself, and I'd find things and play on the swings and that sort of thing, look at the big overhead screen, and then Dave would let me go into the projection booth. I could choose. He had a little record player that would put the music through all the little speakers hanging on the stands. So we saw many movies. It was always a struggle for me to stay awake, but things like Carry On Henry, Trinity, you know, those really bad cowboy movies. My Name is Trinity. I loved them at the time. The Taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. In South Africa, censorship was pretty bad, so they were butchered, those films. But yeah, sure enough, there I was in the Austin Apache, and we were watching movies with Dave, the projectionist. So glad that I remembered that, because I had to tell you. Back to Gladstone Avenue. Sure, so we left the flat, we moved into Gladstone Avenue. Little did we know we were lighting a spark that would provoke another Boer War, because the neighbours did not take to us. In fact, when we finally left Gladstone Avenue, apparently they stood in a line and applauded as the removalist van took us away with a slow clap and signals of death to the Englishman. But it wasn't always like that. We first had to get in there. Today, I'm going to announce to you, we should have Brian Gould on the video tomorrow. Today is February the 10th, it's a Friday. I'm going to try and interview Brian this weekend from South Africa. He lives in Boksburg, not too far away from Brakpan. He's going to remember, I'll ask him about the Heralds, the Herald Boys, the State Mines, and we're going to talk a bit about Gladstone Avenue. And what we're going to talk about is the band called Electric Birth. I'm not going to tell you too much. Fact is that I haven't spoken to Brian one-on-one in any real sense for 25 years. I haven't seen him for that long. So I'm going to ask his memories of Electric Birth. However, Electric Birth, myself and Brian were the 2 lead and rhythm guitarists, and we interchanged. Gary Herald was a drummer for a little while. Arnie Herald, Arnie, was on bass, and we performed most of our shows, and we did all our rehearsing in Gladstone Avenue in the lounge room, which we'll point out via a photograph for you when I put that up on screen. I don't want to go too much into who Electric Birth were, how we got started, because I don't want my memories to mix up with Brian's too much. I've got my own ideas, and he'll have his, and we can collaborate and see how Electric Birth was born, who was in them, and what became of this legendary Brakpan band, the electric band that was unplugged. Let me put it that way. So hope I've got your appetite whet a little bit. We'll be interviewing Brian, hopefully this weekend. Later on we'll be interviewing my brother Aidan to get some of his views of Gladstone Avenue and his involvement in the band Void that went on to become Evoid. You can see Evoid on YouTube, quite a successful South African band. We'll also be talking to Agnes, who was my brother's fiancée back in those days and came to Gladstone Avenue many times, so we'll get some memories from her. So let's up this a little bit with a bit more content and hearing from some of the people that were there living in Brakpan in the 1970s. Thanks for sticking with me.